Okay guys, so I am extremely excited to be doing this video for the community today. I'm sat here with none other than my DNA coach, Mr. Jonny Deacon. And as many of you heard on the call, I made a commitment to myself this year to really get on top of my fitness. And as you all know, you hear me preach enough, I'm a huge believer on investing in yourself and getting the right coach or mentor or personal trainer, whatever it might be, in whatever particular area of life that you're working on. And I went on this whole rant that if you really want to create change in your life, and I mean significant change, whether that be your income, your wealth, your relationships, your health, it's often very naive to think that you're going to do it alone and you're going to do it with just subtle change. Even just incremental change in habits can have a huge impact over a long period of time. But if you really want to crush a year, in other words, you want to create drastic change, same with your online business or your relationships, you really do need to become a very, very different person. And with that said, I made a commitment to myself towards the end of 2016 that I was really going to get on top of my health. And what I mean particularly is start really living life in a sustainable way where my health isn't going to be affected. The amount I'm maybe drinking or eating or the wrong foods, my diet, my workout routine. And it's fair to say, Jonny's been on my radar for a while. He's done exceptionally well, being part of DEA, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But he was my go-to guy. It's fair to say that I've not met anyone in my life, frankly, who has the abilities and knowledge that Jonny has to sort of coach people to health. And so I invited Mr. Deacon here to come and spend a week with me. We're in a place called Watson's Bay in sunny Sydney. Jonny's from the UK. And to work with me to really get my health under control. And I'm very pleased to say that you agreed to do that.
Thank you for having me, Stuart. It's been wonderful. Watson's Bay is beautiful.
Yeah.
Lovely place you've got here as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. Just in an Airbnb, managed to get it quite last minute, and I have to say we've been enjoying ourselves here. And I want to do a video with Jonny to really elaborate on some of the stuff that I spoke about on the founders call, for those of you who were on the call, because frankly we had a lot of people emailing and reaching out, and I said, look, if anyone's interested in knowing more about Jonny's new venture and his DNA business, to shoot an email. And to be honest with you, we're a little bit surprised by the response. So with that said, I thought, look, let's do something for the community that would be really valuable and just talk about some of the things that we've been going through in my own personal health journey. So Jonny, let's not rush this video. I want to really add as much value as I can. And I want to start off with really how you got into the health industry, into personal training, and then get deeper into more of the advanced stuff you're doing now, the science behind fitness and everything else.
Absolutely.
So let's start with you left university.
That's right.
And what was your first venture? What was the first thing you got into?
Well, like most people, I left university. I was at St Andrews up in Scotland in Fife, and came out of university, and the first kind of thing was to get a job, basically to make as much money back as possible in terms of the student loan. But very quickly realised that I couldn't work for anyone else, and I actually had to be my own boss. I was always very entrepreneurial as a kid. I started my entrepreneurial life as running paper rounds and actually having other guys work for me as paper round at a very young age. So I knew that was there, but because of school and university and that quite traditional mindset, I ended up doing that process, which I think a lot of people can connect with. Actually coming out of uni and realising that I wanted to be my own boss, my first venture was a fashion label, primarily t-shirts. It did very, very well. We had Top Man, Urban Outfitters, ASOS globally, but then it did very, very badly. And it pretty much did that on a roller coaster ride for the whole 4.5 years I was doing that business. And as we've spoken about off air, the problem with the traditional world is there's not a lot of leverage, and you're dealing with multiple different things going on within the business, from suppliers, front end, retail, and I was a one-man band. And along with cash flow and actually trying to scale that business, it was incredibly challenging, but I learned a huge amount from it.
Awesome. So you started entrepreneurial journey pretty young.
Yeah.
And here's the big question: how on earth did you go from a successful, struggling, successful fashion business into being a PT?
Well, like most people, when they're doing a startup business, I had a side job, and to start with, that was actually bar work. But I quickly realised that wasn't actually going to allow me to turn up to my business with 100% each day. So I was going to the gym, and one of the things that was consistent with me throughout that whole period was actually training myself and actually doing a body transformation, which over the course of 3.5 years during that time really started to bring the best out of me. And I was fortunate enough to have a mentor in the gym one day who said to me, he was watching me training, he gave me a few tips, and he said, you know what, come in tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock and I'll show you a few things. And I ended up training with that guy 5 days a week for the next 2 years.
Wow.
And I just had an incredible internship with this amazing human being. He really set me on the path of understanding that I was very passionate about my own transformation within health and fitness. But when people were starting to come up and ask me questions about it, I knew that I had a calling for this, and educating and inspiring others with their body was something that I was truly passionate about. So, in short, the fashion label was an amazing way to have a business, but waking up towards the end of that business and realizing that it wasn't my true calling and purpose, to finally allowed me to move into personal training full time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love these type of videos because there's so many different things that we can sort of cover and and value that we can provide. So something you just said there that sort of caught my attention is how you figured out your own personal transformation.
Yeah.
In other words, you got yourself healthy and fit, and obviously it became visible. You know, you're a healthy looking guy, you're in the gym, people are coming up and approaching you. And the funny thing is this is kind of how I got into this whole world of teaching online business, because you know, I was successful online, you know, I had a bit of a knack for it, I changed my life, and all of a sudden I had friends and then some family members reaching out to me and being like, you know, how have you done all of this, Stuart? What is this affiliate marketing thing all about? And I think it's great when that happens, when you get yourself into this phase in life where you're really just magnetically attracting people to you because they just see that you're walking the walk. And that's something I've witnessed with you over this week, is just you really walk the walk when it comes to health and fitness and everything else.
Well, thank you.
So, all right, so you got into PTing.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that journey. So when you started getting your first clients and you started, you know, training people and helping people with their transformation, just in the next sort of couple of minutes, tell us about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is, after interning with this guy unofficially and people actually starting to come up to me, because at that stage my physique had really transformed, and people that had been in the gym had seen that transformation. It was a nice long vision with that. It wasn't a short-term fix. I really looked at my nutrition profile, I looked at my workouts, and it came a phase where I actually started to know more than the actual guy that was training me. But he was such a lovely guy, and he was an older guy. He realized that I was a real go-getter and wanted to really take it to the next level. I'd always been passionate about biology at school, so I'd always kept my toe in the water in terms of keeping up to date with what was happening within the health and fitness space. But really, when the shift happens, when I decided that I wanted to go into personal training full time and actually close the fashion business, and I knew that was right when I was working with clients very early on, starting from the ground up. I mean, half my time was cleaning toilets to be able to pay for my gym rent, and I was in a commercial gym, and most of the commercial gyms do that to be able to allow you to start to build your business. But very, very quickly I built a 40-hour-a-week business, and it actually got to the point where it started to get to 50 and in some cases 60 hours a week. And I know we've spoken about it off air, but the problem with that is you become very, very tired towards the end of the day. I was doing 12 clients a day, and it was actually detrimental to the client experience, so I really needed to find a solution for that. I was maxed out on my hourly contact.
So I think a lot of us can definitely relate to that, especially when you're an expert in a certain field. And you realise that there's only so much I can sell of my time, there's only so much I can do to take my career to that next level. So you're in this commercial gym, you're maxed out. What was the next thing? What was the next phase?
Well, the commercial gym was a really good place to be able to understand my trade and my craft. And working your way up, you have to drop the ego. You have to really look and listen and understand what your clients' needs are. And that was the one thing I felt that separated me from the other guys in the gym and allowed me to elevate the business, is that I actually really took the time to listen and understand their purpose. And that really led me on a way, which we'll talk about, to build out a unique process myself as to where we are today. But the jump really came when I decided, I really looked at it, I said, do I stay in as you know, a big fish in a small pond, or or do I really jump to the next level? And the next level at that stage was to go into a private gym, a studio space. And that was really a different level. That really took my career in terms of authority to the next level, where I started training celebrity clients in London and actually all over the world. And that really allowed me to like drop my numbers with my clients to make it a very one-to-one experience and build out a long-term vision with their health and fitness. And I'm pleased I did it, because I had the courage to jump to something that at the time was just, I didn't know if it was going to work in terms of like, you know, how it is when you're trying to look at the next level, you know, you're trying to weigh up the risks, but you actually have to just take the courage and make the commitment to the next step. And it was the best thing I ever did.
So the question I have for you is, as somebody who was dealing with commercial gym, which I assume is the typical model of, you know, people are coming in, signing up, they get a free PT session, then you potentially sell them a block of training, and then through to the new phase of where you're sort of working more uniquely, one-on-one, I assume charging a lot more for your time.
Yes.
Did you see a drastic difference in terms of the outcome that individuals were getting in comparison to the ones that signed up to a gym and did a basic PT session, in comparison to those that were like, look, Johnny, I really need a proper coach here, I'm prepared to pay for it, and I want to take my health to a whole new level?
Hugely. I mean, my mindset when I was charging more was the fact that I could invest that money in terms of what I could actually do for my clients. As you'll find out, I'm very forward thinking in terms of adding technology and good quality materials to clients throughout their health and fitness journeys, and it allowed me to instantly add more value to the client. So that money investment was put straight back into the client experience, along with being in a much better environment for the client. The problem with the commercial gyms is the fact that it's very much a one-size-fits-all approach, a template 101 approach, where trainers really, the most trainers I've come into contact with, they just really limit themselves in not furthering their education and actually moving with the industry. And as you'll find out, my feelings on the PT and health and fitness space are this clear. Within 8 to 10 years, the entire industry will die as we know it. And we'll come on to talk about it, but it's very, very exciting for those that actually want to move forward with trainers that are embracing technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know from just the experience of what we've done this week so far, how awakened I've become to the mistakes I've been making in the past, which is something I want to talk to you about, because I think this is something that we can talk about, that people can take action on right away.
Absolutely.
To support them with their health decisions for 2017. So Johnny, let's talk about that. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people make in their transformation, in going from not being content and satisfied with where they are with their health and fitness, much like myself, to the journey of actually being successful with the transformation? What's the biggest mistakes you see happening?
It's such a fantastic question, and actually starting in that private gym, I'm a big fan of someone like Dan Sullivan, who he really looks at what is the quality of your questions in terms of your market. And I asked one simple question in terms of relation to the health and fitness industry or where it's going, and that was, why do most people struggle to achieve optimum health and fitness and actually never achieve the body of their dreams, whether that be optimizing their energy, aesthetically the way they look, their sleep, their nutrition. And I went about a very vigorous journey for 2.5 years to be able to try and solve this and actually look at all the elements which are required in that process. One of the biggest mistakes that people can take away right now is that a lot of the time it's not clients' fault, and it's not even trainers' fault, because they haven't looked at the bigger picture of this and actually formulated a solution that holistically takes people from zero all the way through. What I mean by that is, when you ask that question, why do most people struggle? Me and you, Stuart, look different. On the outside, most people will be aware that when you look at an individual, we all look different. And one of the big misses and big assumptions is that we're all the same on the inside, when actually we're very, very different on the inside. The way we metabolize nutrients, the way we deal with toxins, our carbohydrate fat sensitivities in relation to macro splits, all of these things have a very big effect on how you actually process food. And that has a relationship in terms of how your energy is exposed within your body, and also the way that your physique looks. And actually identifying that with people and understand that they're actually different on the inside and on the outside, you then move yourself out of the one-size-fits-all bucket into something where we start to look at you as an individual. And I became obsessed with this, and this is how I started to get prolific results with clients.
So would you say, I mean, I guess in plain English, one way of looking at it is that people pick up ideas from friends and what they read and celebrity endorsements, and they pick up about these fads, these health fads.
Absolutely.
And some of those fads actually could be quite effective to some people, but completely ineffective to another. So what's a prime example? If I was to say, what's your typical fad that you hear? Is it your high protein or your low carb diet? Just let's take one as an example. What's a fad that people fall for?
It's just such a good question, especially at this time of year. And the one thing to remember with this is, currently in the health and fitness space, people focus on training theory and, like what you've said, what works for a certain amount of people. And I don't know about you, Stuart, but I don't want to actually risk my health with guessing. And
I have been, and it's not worked. So.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, you'll get the cases, and those might argue, viewers might argue that, oh, well, this did actually work for me. Of course, 1 in a million, you'll always get the work. You'll always know a friend or a family member that actually worked for them. But the majority of the time, we're guessing. And I just don't want to, especially with my clients, I never want to guess. I want to use science. When we talk about fads, one of the biggest fads that I hear, even to this day, is low carbohydrate based diets. Now, actually, the technology which we're going to talk about is actually in relation to DNA testing, where we can stop using training theory in the one size fits all and look at your blueprint of your genes to identify what certain diets will be optimal to you. We actually know that the low carb based diet is actually optimal to you based on your results. But this fad of low carb diets comes in the form of being okay for everyone. And we actually know that there's a gene in particular which is called the FTO gene. And if you Google it, it actually comes up with carb sensitivity marker, or the fat gene, quote unquote. And what that means is, how well do you tolerate carbohydrates? Now, there's various different versions of genes. I don't want to get into much detail about it, because I know we're going to have some support education in later videos. But I'll tell you this, those with the TT version of that FTO gene, they're 3 times more likely to put on weight when on a low carb diet than not. So you have individuals that are walking around going, why can I not lose weight, quote unquote, when all of these individuals around me, my friends and family, are actually on a low carb diet and they're losing weight? But there's an additional point there. Most people that are on low carbohydrate diets, what they're actually doing is eating away all their good quality lean muscle mass, and it's actually something called skinny fat, where the proportions of fat are much bigger than their muscle mass. Sorry, I'm a bit passionate about this, but I really want to get this across.
I think this is just such an important point, because we're in the gym the other day, aren't we?
Yes.
I'm in the gym with Jonny, and we go in there, and in the time we're in there, which is quite a while, because I was actually signing up to get access and everything, we saw one trainer with 3 different individuals. And, to give you an idea, one guy was probably in his early 20s, another lady was probably middle-aged, and another guy who was, I would guess, maybe late 50s. And the training program that the trainer was putting these individuals through was identical. It was like an identical training program.
That's right.
The reality of what I've experienced and from what I've learned from you is that this is what we all end up doing when trying to take control of our health, is that we kind of go down these typical strategies that are given by, maybe the industry as a whole, and sometimes maybe just because we take advice from, our friend who happens to be in good shape or something like that, and think we can mirror it. And the reality is whether it be the way that you work out, the food that you're eating, based of course around your own personal goals, it's a lot more complicated than just the standard process that most of us would fall for.
Absolutely. I'll just add to that, Stuart. It's really good points. We know that those that actually are on a genetically a diet which they're adhering to is genetically matched to them, they're are much more likely. Studies have shown, 2007, there was an amazing study in Sweden which shows much more likely to adhere to a diet if you know that it's genetically matched than not. And in this study, they went back a year later to 2008 and actually demonstrated that those on the genetically matched diet compared to the mismatch actually maintained their diet, and those that were mismatched actually went on to put on more weight. Every single member in that group put on more weight in the genetically mismatched diet. And that's just one of very many studies that we've actually managed to leverage in terms of the unbelievable amount of research that's now indicating that we now know that genes are the only way to go in terms of a blueprint for your strategy of health fitness. Yet, I believe out of 100%, we're still at 2-3% of where this technology in the future is going. So viewers that are watching this, you're so ahead of the curve already.
If you take it on board.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go another whole level now. Let's start really talking about what separates you from many of the trainers out there, and why I personally have put my faith in you. So you are now going through a process where, and you've been for some time, taking your individual clients who are often, you know, busy CEOs, celebrities, that kind of individual, and you've been having them go through a test, a DNA test.
That's right.
Let's talk about the test. How does that test work?
In very short terms, you basically get sent out in the post anywhere you are in the world a mouth swab. So it's not invasive. It's not like a blood test. You literally do a mouth swab like you did, like brushing your teeth either side of your cheek for a minute. And you pop that back in a test tube, send it off to the lab, and roughly on average 4 weeks, thereabouts, 30 days, we get your results back.
Awesome. Now, let's talk about some of the key components once that test comes back. So for me anyway, the components that have had the biggest impact is knowing my diet, my food. For myself, I'm ideal for the Mediterranean diet, quite low carbs after certain times in the day. And then on top of that, the way that I should work out.
Yes.
You know, the way that we're able to take the results back from the DNA test and then optimize my health is in many different markers, there's many different ways.
Yes.
So let's just talk about, to start with, the two key ones here of nutrition, diet, and exercise.
Yeah.
How is it from my DNA you can optimize my workout plan and my nutrition?
It's such a vast subject and I'm passionate about it, as you can probably tell, but just to give a 101 of this, when we get your results back, there's two reports, a fitness report and a nutrition report, and there's 45 genes in total that we look at. And we only look at genes that have had vigorous protocols of scientific research behind them. And it's really important that if you decide to use our test or another test, make sure it actually has an algorithm that can weight the genes specific to the markers. Why is that important? It gives validity in looking at a cumbersome of results. So what that means is it looks at lots of different genes in relation to that research and actually makes sure that the information and data you're getting back is A, usable, and B, one that you can put it into a strategy with. For instance, on the fitness side, we know with you in terms of being 4 markers, we look at a power and endurance score, we look at a VO2 max reading, and we also look at an injury risk and a recovery time. And we know from you that your percentages on a power and endurance scale were 70-30, 70% endurance and 30% power. Now, for those of you at home that are asking questions about that, what I like to sometimes use when I'm doing consultancy one-on-one with clients is think about something at school that you potentially used to enjoy from an athletic point of view. You might have had a predisposition to doing sprints like 100 meter or 200 meters or more long distance. Whatever that is, it doesn't matter because you'll never change your goals, but now we can look at your percentage splits in relation to those and start to optimize your training, whatever your goals are, to those percentage scores. We know from science that you'll get 3 times the results to actually work into those percentage scores. How do we know that? Well, there was a study done at Manchester University and they took 86 scholarship level students, males and females, across sports like rugby, hockey and football, and they actually gave them all a DNA test and created 2 groups, a genetically matched and a genetically mismatched, and then created a training program over 8 weeks. Just before that started, they did a jump test for power and then an aero bike test, which is a long distance bike test for the endurance profile. The results came back 8 weeks later. The genetically matched group, as we said, actually did 2.7 times, but pretty much 3 times the results in the same amount of time. Yeah. And in layman's terms, Stuart, that's the difference between losing over, say for instance, 3 to 4 months of training of 5% body fat in comparison to 10% body fat, or losing 4 stone in comparison to 8 stone, sorry. So you're doubling your result.
Which is something that I am such a believer in every area of life. It's like, what can we do to be smarter rather than just always looking to work harder or be the grafter? It's something that I'm a big fan of in business, is leverage.
Absolutely.
And, for me, when you can start to think smarter and learn about yourself in smarter ways, you can then optimize your health in that way, where I know now that, from the coaching, the advice and the science behind my insides, I suppose, that I'm able to get 2.7 times the results in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Which to me is just such a no-brainer, and it's almost imperative that the industries evolve if that is the case, because it's game-changing for people in their life expectancy, their health, their quality of life, and everything else. All right, so let's move into the next section, really. And what I want to say is, if I was an individual watching this video from home and I wanted to really create change for myself in 2017, we now know that one of the most powerful things that you can do is work from science, like actually create a program based on your genetics, your science, get 2.7 times the results as a minimum, because I know that's just one of the markers.
Just on the power and endurance, yes.
Yeah, you know, I'm in this position where I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it happen this year. What 3 tips can you give individuals to really maximize and take control of their health? Whether it means a lot more work or preparation, doesn't matter. Like, I'm somebody who's serious about getting my health in order. I'm going to do the work to set myself up for success. What 3 things would you recommend people do?
Well, the first thing is, it sounds obvious now, but is you absolutely need to get a DNA test. Because once you get a DNA test, you remove yourself from the one-size-fits-all into the individual bucket. And that's the whole point, creating leverage for yourself. There are a couple of things that I just wanted to pick up on in terms of those 2 reports. We spoke briefly about the fitness report. We know from your report, mate, that you actually are a very high injury risk. And you told me about a story a few years ago where actually you went for your first ever personal training session, which is so standard within the industry. It's this kind of quick warm-up, if there is a warm-up, quick form filling about what your history is with health and fitness, and then onto the gym floor. And we know that you were injured by about 10 or 15 minutes into the session. If the individual had known what your injury profile would be, and that looks at markers like GDF5, COL1A1, COL5A1, these genes, they're in relation to knee and ligament and tendons in your elbows, shoulders, and your elbows, shoulders, and knees and elbows. Sorry, getting confused with my tendons. Effectively, when you look at those markers, we would know going into the gym that we want to make sure that you're actually ready for that kind of impact on your system. And on the nutrition side, we know that you're actually a high-risk celiac predisposition, which is in relation to gluten sensitivity. And in knowing that, we can really put protocols in with your diet. One of the things I would say first off is if you're going to get a DNA test, make sure it's good quality. They're not all the same. We spoke briefly before about getting one with an algorithm, and you need to make sure that you actually do your research in terms of understanding that the test you choose actually has the quality research behind each gene. So that's a really fundamental point to start with. But as soon as you get that genetics test, you'll be able to see your fitness and your nutrition profiles, which covers things like carb sensitivities, fat sensitivities. It will look at your vitamin and mineral requirements. This is something we should probably very quickly touch on. The fact that people are going out to the marketplace and grabbing all types of different supplements, not really knowing how their body metabolizes those nutrients. And actually, we now know from the reports like we did with you, we can look through the back of the report and actually see what your requirements are for vitamin D, vitamin C, the B6s and B12s, and so forth.
That's awesome. So someone commits to the science, they get the DNA test. What other tips would you give with regards to people sort of taking control? Absolutely.
I think the next big thing with this is understanding habits and actually starting to shape habits. I know that you've done a lot of work with the community on this. The science behind it is fundamentally very clear. You need to actually start looking for what your current habits are, and a technique here is to start writing down some of your bad habits, if not all of them, and starting to understand what's triggering those. Once you start to do that, you can start to put a strategy in place and actually start to create new habits. A key learning here, if I can share it with you, is there's something called Keystone Habits. And an exercise in itself is a Keystone Habit. And what that means is, if you start implementing Keystone Habits, they'll actually have a knock-on effect on the rest of your life. To give you an example, like when you and I came back from the gym last night and we're starting new habit creation with you, the first thing that you said to me you wanted to do was get some protein in, and then you asked me advice on what meal you wanted. And you're shifting your habits to start to reflect what your identity is about going to the gym. It's very difficult to have an identity of going to the gym 5 to 6 times a week and then actually partying as soon as you get out of the gym and trying to get up every morning to do the same thing and repeat. So creating new habits is absolutely fundamental to this process.
Okay, so here's a question for you. I might throw you here.
Okay.
Let's say my biggest flaw is that I have an awful habit to eat a dirty, disgusting breakfast. You know, that's where I am at right now. I get up in the morning and I'm eating your typical poor quality breakfast. If that was your client's situation, is there any advice you'd give them to break that habit? anything specific?
Such a good question. With technology today, one of the things we coaches is using apps. One of the apps we like to use is MyFitnessPal. Some of the viewers might be aware of it. Effectively, the research shows the very act of writing down your food for a week actually disgusts most people. And if that's not enough, actually combining it with the gym and then having someone that you're accountable to, which we'll talk about in a minute, finding the right trainer, it actually means that you're actually looking and going, goodness me, is this what I'm putting in my system? Now, the tactic to that, to the overall strategy, is to actually start implementing all your food and then looking at it across the week and going, what day out of this week could I remove that is full of junk? And say to myself, today on Monday, I'm going to make this entirely clean. And you continue that over a 6-week period, introducing a good day every day. And some people like to have a cheat day. I'm not a fan of that because we actually, at my DNA coach flexible dieting. The difference between structured and flexible dieting is structured is the atypical, I'm your new personal trainer, I'm going to give you a diet which I give to all my other clients, whatever their age and whatever they look like anyway, and you're going to follow it by the button. The first thing the client does, gets home and says to their wife or partner, you know what, I really don't like tuna or sweet potatoes. Flexible dieting allows you to take responsibility and ownership, and actually with an app like MyFitnessPal, you create your own meals hitting macro numbers that your personal trainer gives you.
So effectively what you are saying, there's something I picked up on there, is it's almost like you're saying you're better to wean yourself off your bad habits when it comes to something like nutrition. Because I can imagine, like, you get a lot of people, New Year resolution, I'm going to eat healthy, and then one minute they're, you know, through the Christmas, they're eating anything they want, they're having Christmas cakes and all sorts.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, January 1st hits and they're on the juicing cleanse, they're on the detox diet, and they're going from one extreme to the other.
Yes.
Would you say, typically speaking, that does not work?
Such a good question again, and we haven't planned these. One of the things I would say about, just a quick side note about an example of January juicing, the misconception is that juicing is a detoxification agent where you're getting vegetables and fruit and you're just all bunging it in and you're blending it on a NutriBullet and sinking them for 30 days. Look, from a medical point of view, we know that detoxification actually means detoxification of your liver. There's 2 phases of that, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 actually takes your food substance in your body and makes it soluble, and phase 2, without oversimplifying it, actually takes that soluble substance and shifts it out of the body through urination and sweating. Now, the problem you have in terms of detoxification from a genetic point of view is we're all different. So actually some of us are very efficient at that process and some aren't. So if people over the festive period of having loads of chicken, potentially in Australia having barbecue meats, and there's lots of carcinogenics and BPAs through things like water bottles, which you have to be careful with, the one thing I can tell you right now is that based on your genes, some have the enzyme that can produce and deal those carcinogenics and some can't. And the gene in particular is called GSTM1 and GMT1, and you either produce it or you don't. But if you don't, like you can get it from cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, unfortunately, and you can start to implement them within your diet as a protocol.
And that in itself is, I assume, an extremely sustainable approach as well, because, you know, once you know that, you can just make sure, oh, okay, even if you are using a NutriBullet now and again, you know, you can make sure that you're throwing those things in that your body requires based on your genetics.
Just to note, I'm not a NutriBullet hater. Anything that can get people to move towards a direction of health and fitness, I love. But frankly, the reason that I'm working with Stuart is because I'm all about leverage and pathways to power and being efficient. And anyone can get fit and healthy, quote unquote, but how do we know we're actually optimizing you like a spec in a nice sports car? We're actually really fine tuning you. I know I'd rather drive a Lambo to my health and fitness than something like a Ford Toyota. Can I just mention something else about habits? Sorry, just to get this out, because this is a really great teaching point, and I think some of your viewers will get massive value from it. For habit formulation, in terms of a scientific point of view, your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the outer layer of your brain, that's the thing which actually creates new habits. That's the thing that actually is engaged when you're making a decision about something. So believe it or not, the habits you have in your life at the moment were dictated by your prefrontal cortex. The basal ganglia is a much older, established part of the brain, and what that does is when your prefrontal cortex picks something up that it actually, you know, wants to do and create a habit around, the reason it does that is because our brains are inherently lazy and they want to make things really easy and mundane, so it has more energy to do other things, it passes it to the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia goes, okay, I'm going to put this on autopilot now, and it goes back in the brain, so to speak. The problem with that is every day we're picking up all of these habits and not really understanding why we're doing it, and the basal ganglia is getting bigger and bigger and filling up with more and more habits until actually we just forget about it. So we're actually autopilot most of the time. In fact, 40% of what we do in the day is actually based on a habit. And I really urge you to just go through that list of habits that you have, good or bad, and actually take charge of it, take responsibility and go, do you know what, basal ganglia, I'm taking that back, prefrontal cortex taking it back, and I'm actually going to own it, and I'm going to take responsibility for it. And you can create new habits, which we actually work with clients at My DNA Coach to do. But the third one is accountability, and that's actually looking at a coach and a mentor. And I know that your viewers, and I'm doing that with you and the leaders at SFM, I believe you can get results on your own, but I don't want to risk, I don't want to do trial and error, and I don't want to do risk or guess with my health and fitness. I'm sure you guys don't want to do that with your businesses, otherwise you wouldn't be part of the SFM community. But in terms of accountability, it's very, very, very powerful. And we know that accountability can come in all shapes and forms. You don't need to be directly with one person. It can be through a digital environment. But I can tell you this, you need to look for certain attributes of a coach, specifically as a personal trainer or a coach, which I've really kind of formulated into a top 3, so to speak. The first one is actually find someone that actually records your data and creates a starting point for you. And what I mean by that is, there's no good in going on your health and fitness journey without actually logging data about yourself. And I like to do that at the start and in quarterly increments, at minimum 6-month increments with my clients. And we do that things through starting with DNA, but also looking at things like DEXA scanning, which actually puts you in a scanner, like a CT scan, and actually looks at your lean muscle mass in comparison to your body fat, but also looks at your bone density. So for those of you that are in your later years of life, osteopenia and osteoarthritis can become very, very severe in later years if you don't have lots of lean muscle mass. So one of the protocols we like to do with older clients is actually starting to retain as much lean muscle mass and gain as much lean muscle mass as possible. The other thing to look for with trainers is actually take the time to assess what their credentials are. Do they really know what they're talking about? Can they actually deliver for what you want as a coach? And one of the big misconceptions is when people sign up for coaching and PTs and personal trainers, they'll do 10 and 20 blocks. And we've spoken about it off air. I just think that's just so old school. It's such a traditional method of looking at how to coach people. We actually look at a really long-term vision with clients, and I would propose that whether you work with us or someone else or whatever you decide to do, really go into that coaching and understand that it is a 12-month or more vision. Don't look at this 30, 60, 90-day fix, because you wouldn't look at your businesses like that in terms of becoming a millionaire within 90 days. And the same goes for health and fitness. Should that be that's just one example, but you really need to focus on that. And the last thing in terms of personal training is actually, do they understand who you are? Have they taken the time at the very start before any of the DEXA scanning, DNA testing to go, Stuart, what is your purpose? What is your why? And that's one of the big things that we built out as part of our process of My DNA Coach, and the wonderful things we did with Alex Eastman and Jay Kubizak and JJ is actually really understand from a client perspective, what is your why? Why are you at the start line with your health and fitness?
So I guess in a nutshell, what you're really saying is do your due diligence and really take your time to get the right PT or the right coach and get yourself set up for the right environment.
Absolutely.
Which I just couldn't agree with more in every area of life. Like if there's one thing that's had the biggest impact on my life in 35 years I've been on this planet, is finding the right leadership, the right coaches, the right mentors. And I think like when it does come to health and fitness, it's so tempting to go to your local gym, sign up, and then get offered your free PT session, and then you get put through your paces, you're sweating, and you think, okay, this guy's gonna this is the guy, this is the gal that's gonna really get me to my goals. But in reality, you're really not setting yourself up for success by not taking the time to do that research and due diligence.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jonny, so I think that's probably enough for this video. video. I'll probably try and twist your arm and do a couple more, just so we can put some more information out there. As I said on the founders call, Jonny is in beta launch of his new DNA coaching business, and I can tell you from my own personal perspective, it's been incredibly powerful so far, and I'm actually just starting going through the platform myself as a beta tester, and it's extremely exciting. With that all said, because we've been having a lot of requests coming in, actually since I first mentioned this in June last year,
yes.
There is a waiting list. There is only so many people Jonny's able to work with through this beta test phase. However, with Jonny being a DEA student, he has agreed for us to kind of jump the queue somewhat.
Absolutely.
And be able to put people at the forefront. And on top of that, Jonny's also doing or potentially doing a very special deal for each and every individual, because it's helping him with creating the overall platform that he's going to be releasing mid-2017 to the general public. So feel free to reach out. I think is it support at mydnacoach.com?
That's exactly it. Yeah, support at mydnacoach.com.
So send an email to support at mydnacoach.com if you want to be on that list or be considered for further information. And when the time is right, Jonny or somebody from his team can reach out, and maybe just like myself, you're ready to make 2017 a year of difference when it comes to taking control of your health. Thanks again, Jonny, and look forward to doing another video with you very soon.
Thanks, Stuart. As always, it's a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, man.
Thanks.